Hello, everyone. This is Let's Talk Sports with Tim McCain, and I am here with very special guest, the athletic director of UNCG, Miss Record. Thank you very much for accepting this interview. How are you doing
Well,
today?
thank you for inviting me, and glad to know that you're a Spartan.
Yes, ma'am.
Very important.
2018. Yes, ma'am. So, my first question to you is, when did you fall in love with sports, and did you play any growing up?
It's probably the best trivia question. I am probably the most uncoordinated Division One athletic director that's out there. That would be the award I would win. When you say falling in love with sports, I didn't play. In high school, I grew up, I was the behind the scenes person. I was the newspaper editor. I was the first female manager for our high school football team, did public address at track. So, as a first generation college student, I went to the University of Virginia, which was 20 minutes from home. I'd grown up going to games at Virginia, and so when I walked onto the campus, um, I had been a really big fish in a tiny pond, and in college, I was a really tiny fish in a big pond. So I started volunteering in sports information, which has grown and now is considered strategic communications. And I worked press row, and I did that all 4 years of college. And so I love sports. I love the value that sports brings to young people. I love higher ed. But no, I'm not very good at physical things.
I
So,
got you. I got
great
you.
Trivial Pursuit player though.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, what was that experience like being the first female manager of your high school team?
Well, I think that it's interesting. I didn't really think about it, and I've been very blessed throughout my career, having grown up around the University of Virginia. I worked there all 4 years during I'm going to date myself now, the early 80s, Ralph Sampson,
Great player.
Final Four. I never felt anything as it related to my gender, but I came through the business side of sports, if you think of it that way. And it probably wasn't until I went to Florida State um, and I went as there's a designation in the NCAA, a senior woman administrator. And when I went to Florida State, it was probably the first time that, it was like, oh, you're the woman. You're doing the woman stuff. It's like, well, no, not really. So probably as I have become more seasoned and think about those things, um, but it hasn't been an issue. And while I don't think that I'm militant about that, obviously there's a difference, but we're not talking about qualities that are gender specific in terms of leadership, consensus building, managing people, all of those things. You just have a different take on how you do it.
I got you. So, how did those universities like Florida State and in Virginia, how did they teach you about leadership and going for the things that you care about?
Um, I think a lot for me is having great role models, having good mentors, people who teach you, having people that are willing to be honest with you, even when it hurts. And I'm a big reader, and so a lot of that, and sometimes it's trial and error. Um, if you stop growing, um, I don't think that's good, and so you can always get better.
I got you. So, what was the process of becoming a athletic director at UNCG?
I don't know that I got out of college thinking I wanted to be an AD. I think, like a lot of young people, I went to college wanting to be a psychiatrist. Then I realized you had to go to medical school. I don't like math and science,
Me neither.
so I majored in sociology and history, and then I worked all 4 years in athletics. So then it's, do I go to graduate school in sports administration? I had done some work with Raycom Jefferson with the ACC TV network. Do I go to Charlotte? That's where they were based. Or do I get a real job, which is what I think my father thought I was going to do after going to college. And there was an internship position at Virginia, $600 a month gross. So, but I went into it and I loved it. And so every time there was an opportunity to think about doing something else, I really liked making a difference in the lives of students and that they bring a diversity to a campus, no different than a musician or a chemist. And then went to Florida State, had a terrific experience there. And I guess what I would say about becoming an athletic director, it's like a lot of things. You can never underestimate anyone that you meet because you don't know how they're going to have an impact on your career. The person who actually recommended me for the UNCG job, I couldn't believe he recommended me. He was the associate commissioner of the Atlantic Coast Conference, Fred Bearcat. He has passed, but I would have never thought he would have recommended me for a job because when I was at Florida State, I worked with him. We had an off-campus facility, so every time I saw his number pop up on my phone, I knew I was going to get yelled at. But he did, and I came up, and people say, well, do you miss football? Do you want football? I never thought about it in those terms of having to have football to be fulfilled. I mean, sports are sports.
That's right.
And I also had come to Greensboro many, many years during my career because the ACC was located here. So, but that's how it happened. Someone that I never expected to call me and say, hey, are you interested in this? And met with the chancellor, and the rest sort of is history.
Yes, ma'am.
Good fit.
I believe so. During your tenure, you come up with UNCG's strategic way. Can you tell our audience what is the strategic way?
Well, I wish I could take credit for that solely. But the Spartan way is interesting. Staff talked about it, and it's about who you are and how you act, and it's something that if you've not been a Spartan or didn't go to school here, it's really we talk about discovering and developing champions in life and doing things the Spartan way. Being accountable, great leadership, having integrity, winning with class. It's all rolled up into that, the Spartan way. The discovering and developing, for me, our coaches go out and discover talented students who have a gift for the sport. This is how they get their education. And then it's our job over that 4 or 5 year period to develop them. And then I feel the same way about staff, hiring coaches or hiring staff, discovering talent, and helping them develop while they're here. That doesn't mean that this UNCG is a place that should be considered a stepping stone by any means. I do want that anyone who has come through our program, when they go to that next step, whatever it is, that they have the best base fundamentally that they can be successful in whatever they do. So that's really the Spartan way.
When you talk about hiring coaches, what was it like when it comes to looking for head coaches for the hiring of Wes Miller? What did you see in him that you were like,
Well, he's the worst example in some respects.
Okay.
I had to hire him, and this is what I mean by that. Wes was an assistant coach here. It's very hard, and I would never want to do it again to make a change mid-season. That's just something very difficult. There were a couple things I learned about Wes. One, very competitive, great motivator, and because he played at Chapel Hill, I knew that if he came in as an interim and didn't win a single game, that he was going to be fine because of his network. That Coach Williams was going to help him, and that the 3 or 4 months that he was a head coach, that would be helpful to him. I was doing a search over here, and I was, and he won. And in some ways, he put himself in a position that I had to hire him. I'm glad I hired him, and
Yeah.
it's been a great run. I sort of laugh a little bit because in year 3, people wanted me to fire him, and it goes to just society as a whole. We need to give people time. We're
Right.
dealing with young people, and he's had a chance to grow and develop and be successful. And he will continue to do so. So what I tell people is that, I want to be sitting on my back porch, on the beach when I retire someday and be watching television or whatever we'll be watching at that moment in time, going, I hired that guy when he, hoists up the national championship and wins it. I believe he's that caliber of person. He cares about the kids. He's a great coach, and he has all the qualities that you would want your son to play for someone like Wes.
Wow.
He's not perfect, though,
Right.
just in case he's watching this.
Yes, ma'am. So I want to shift a little bit for your perspective on a couple of current events that are happening, especially in college sports. With the NCAA, this California state bill, where they're trying to now, it's called the Fair Play to Act or something like that. What is your perspective on paying college athletes to play amateur sports?
I think it's a very complicated issue. You've got the pay for play, and then you've got the California bill speaks to name and image and likeness. So should student athletes be allowed to profit off of their name, image, and likeness, which they cannot do at this point under our NCAA rules. And this is my personal opinion, is that I do believe the scholarship has great value, and that we are amateur sports. For 90% of the college sports that are out there, football and men's basketball in particular have become a very lucrative business. And so for me, it's how do you look at those two sports? Because even in those two sports, less than 5% go on to play professionally. So if you have the pay for play model, then you're not an amateur anymore. It changes the relationship between the university and the student. You become an independent contractor, you become an employee. And then how do you work through that?
It's like the NBA and the NFL and independent contractors.
And that's not the way our model was set up. However, I can see where student athletes, particularly in those sports, sometimes feel like the university and or coaches are profiting off of them. But then you have the question of, are they Zion Williamson first, or was that notoriety because of Duke, and or which one comes first? So it's very complicated. I do think that it is going to be something that the NCAA is going to have to wrestle with, but how we're going to do that, I don't know.
Gotcha, I got you. So my last question to you is, for anybody out there listening, what advice would you give to somebody who has aspirations to be in the sports business or anything in life? So you're a success story. What's the first thing you would tell a young person trying to go out for their dreams?
Be persistent and patient. They're not the same thing, because things don't always come easy. And every learning opportunity, whether it's a positive thing that happens or adversity, learn from and know what is important to you. It's easy for people to say, or a lot of people say they want to work in sports, which is great. I love it. I can't imagine doing anything else. But when I talk to young people about what they think the job is and then what they want. So if you value making a lot of money, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, but if you want to make $1 million, you don't go into college sports, because that's not sort of unless you're one of the top 5 ADs in the country, something like that. If you want to work 8 to 5, have your weekends off, go home at 5, there's nothing wrong with that. That's not college athletics. So you sort of have to know who you are, and sometimes you have to do 2 or 3 jobs before you figure those things out. But the advice is listen a lot, have a group of mentors in different ways that you can learn from, but being persistent while at the same time being patient, and have fun. You work too many years to not love what you do. It doesn't mean you're going to love your first job, but I can honestly say that even through some of the more difficult times, I love what I do. And if I wake up one morning and don't love it anymore, I'll do something else.
Incredible. Incredible. Thank you very much, Ms. Record.
You're welcome.